Thank you.
Yeah, and you will have to forgive me. I will have to refer to notes, especially if there are numbers involved, because my brain can't seem to hold numbers as well as it used to. So working off of information that we've already collected, just to set the stage, in 2020, we had about just under 300,000 folks in our county. Looking out to 2045, that is predicted to grow to 383,000 or more, which represents an increase of about 30%. Most of that growth, of course, fingers crossed, will be in the cities, at least if we want to be in line with our sustainable Thurston goals and urban growth areas, with some of that growth happening in rural county. As you might be aware of, Sustainable Thurston does say to target only 5% of that growth out in the county. But I think the current, and Loretta can correct me if I'm wrong, current growth happening in rural Thurston County is closer to 14%. Is that what it was in the letter? So, updating the comp plan to get us closer to achieving those goals would definitely be a good, a good aspiration. So the scope of our update, and when I said it's the big one, it really is the big one. So on the left-hand side are all of the elements of the comp plan that are required to be updated as part of this periodic review. And then our Board of County Commissioners, based on feedback they received from the community as well as staff, added these strategic updates. So in addition to everything you see on the left-hand side, we're also going to be updating elements related to economic development, health, future land use, an industrial lands review, because we were just finishing up an industrial land study, as well as an appendix that specifically calls out an implementation plan.
I have a quick question, Ashley. Given the projected population growth, I know the league just finished a water study, and our water supplies are stationary, I guess would be the right word. Is there where does that fit in, water use, and would that come into land use or natural resources or what?
Yeah, that's where, and I know that it was brought up in the letter as well, that, all of these things are interconnected. It really is hard to divvy them up into all of these individual chapters and elements. And so there'll be a lot of cross-referencing. And like sort of the core policies will exist in the chapter that makes the most sense. So for, water, it's, probably it's going to be referenced in a number of different chapters. And then I expect all of your organizations to hold us accountable on, like, if it needs to pop up in other places, because you pointed out, was it 3, areas where we should be referencing water, and there's more than that. Yeah, we are definitely mindful that to have development continue to occur, specifically in rural Thurston County, you have to balance all of these other things. And one of those is infrastructure capacity. With things like wells and septic systems and whatnot, and the environmental concerns that come along with those.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, in high level timeline, like right now we've got through scoping, yes. And right now we're in sort of the phase 2 initial outreach and internal review. I am going to let Dana chime in on this, because she's really been on the front lines of trying to go out there and build those relationships with the community. But just really quick, following this sort of initial outreach and internal review, we'll move into planning commission. And when we have planning commission up there, it's not like the whole thing's going to be ready for the planning commission, but some of these chapters are easier to tackle than others. And so we'll bring those to the planning commission as they are ready. And then following the planning commission, of course, and the board, and we'll do the same thing, like those easier chapters to update that might be able to move along on a faster track, we will move them along, and then save space for those bigger things like housing and climate. They're going to take a lot more technical analysis and stakeholder work. But Dana, do you want to share just briefly what it has been like with all your outreach for this second phase of our timeline?
Yeah, I'd love to, Ashley. I want to apologize in advance. I think my bandwidth is a little slow. Can everyone hear me all right?
Yes.
Oh, fantastic. So, I guess I want to start by saying that it is the couple people that are really invested heavily in that outreach on even in this initial phase are really committed to doing things differently, because we want to make sure that engagement is really broad. We want to make sure that we're reaching the audiences that don't normally participate and getting them started at the beginning of the conversation, and then they can touch through the topics that are the most impactful to them or the most meaningful to them. So we really are starting this out differently. So even our initial plan was to do 3 listening sessions in strategic areas in the county, and we said, wait a minute, how many people actually come to us? Let's go to them. And so we did 1 listening session and an additional online, so two total, and have been going out to community events and bringing resources, materials, and just a listening ear to these community events. And so it's looked really different. Just for example, we were at the Juneteenth event. We're at the Nisqually Health and Pride Fair. I was just at Back to School Bash in Rochester. And so just really making sure we're hitting those places in our community that typically, are disconnected, have maybe some barriers to being connected. One of the other pieces is just, our time and resource intensive to gather people into one spot, and they're already busy. So if they're already going to places, it's just way less resource intensive for them, for our community, to meet them where they're at. So that's part of that I guess strategy on our part. I'm really excited about that. We've got some really great engagement going on, and just starting with a simple.
Oops.
We may have all done that, but go ahead, Ashley.
Oh, no, we lost you for a second. I wasn't sure if it was the bandwidth stuff. But no, I think we caught most of it.
Okay.
And I will just highlight real quick, as part of that sort of having equity at the center of our engagement approach is translating those early surveys, going to
Yes.
hosted by organizations that serve Spanish speaking populations, and for the first, like, it's exciting for us to get surveys in Spanish, usually get on our projects. So yeah, I mean, I think just continuing to do that, and to, like, every conversation we have with a trusted community partner is, who else do we need to reach, and what are the best ways to reach them, and having those be the opening points of the conversation. And then, as staff and resources allow, trying to follow through on all of that. And that goes for all of your organizations too. If there are different ways that we should be reaching people, or groups that haven't been part of the conversation that should be part of the conversation, like, please let us know. And we, just commit to being open and transparent about whether we are able to reach out to them, when we're able to reach out to them, and what they can, provide feedback on. Sort of segueing into the two hot topics that I think were identified most in your letter. Of course, it's climate and housing. These are big lifts. We don't have a large staff. There is monies being made available by the Department of Commerce to help jurisdictions address, creating a new climate element, as well as all of the new state laws around housing. Having said that, so although we know we're going to need consultant help to actually do a lot of the technical analysis, the part that's really important for us is that we remain the face of the comprehensive plan update. So we have no plans of hiring a consultant to do the outreach or hiring a consultant to do the engagement. That we really want to remain the face of the plan and building those relationships, because to implement the plan, we need those relationships and partnerships in place. We just, one of the grants we just applied for, the Department of Commerce one, so we haven't heard back on. Oops, it looks like Rebecca will be joining us soon, just in time, because we're almost at climate. And that's basically the housing grant, like the big housing grant. The climate one, the due date isn't until early October. So we're, you'll hear this from Dana, but most of our time so far has been like, prepping to get that grant application in so that we can get those dollars and hire a consultant and get work underway. The way we're envisioning public input and engagement on these two elements, and this is all open to feedback, is topic presentations to existing stakeholder groups that are already engaged, you know, in our planning processes. Focus stakeholder work groups, and we were even, I mean, I did this more in transit, and so you can tell me if it translates, you know, over to this kind of work, but more like community summits. And I think similar things were done for Sustainable Thurston and even Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan. But whether you could actually get more folks in a room if you have a 2 to 3 hour summit on a particular topic, rather than asking people to commit to a stakeholder work group for 10 weeks. So I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on that. I really would like to hear those either now or later. I see one thumbs up, but I can only see like 4 folks. But I don't know. I'll go with what Loretta says. Loretta gave me a thumbs up. And then of course, like open houses, and I think making sure those open houses are not just at county office buildings, but that they're out in the community. Continuing to do the kind of outreach that Dana mentioned, which is like meet people where they are, or work with our trusted community partners to ensure that we're getting the word out, and then hearing back from those communities what their feedback is. And then of course you have your traditional planning commission and board processes, and those are, you know, public hearings and submitting written comment and whatnot. Here's, I didn't make the slide, but there's a lot of bubbles on it. So I will send this out so people can see it, but essentially it's just sort of a timeline and what we expect to happen as we walk through this update process. And then I am going to turn it over to Dana, because I am mindful of time and I want to make sure that there's lots of opportunity for feedback. Oh, and I should say, Dana's leading our climate piece. That's why she's taken the slide.
Well, and I wanted to also touch on that. I'm leading the climate piece because I feel like my background in community education and outreach is what we really need to bring these pieces together. So that's why I've been, I assume that's why I've been put as a lead. And then obviously, you know, working so closely with Rebecca and already having an established partnership with her because of forest conversion work I've been doing. So we're already, you know, utilizing relationships and just deepening and strengthening them. So that's part of that moving forward with the mind. Really, just at a very high level, starting that audit is what we're working on even this week, and making sure we have our priorities set at the right things. And then, you know, working with that grant, hopefully, if we get awarded it, to do those draft changes and then run that through the process that I think most of you are pretty aware of. Again, not wanting to use too much time. There are 2 public hearings through that process. We do have on top of the public review and engagement Ashley's been talking about and I've been talking about, then through the formal process, Planning Commission has a public hearing, and the Board of County Commissioners has a public hearing. So there are informal and formal ways to really work through this and noodle on this with the rest of the community. I do want to pass it over to Rebecca, and just so she can touch really briefly. I know we want to keep it brief. And highlight a little bit about the regional partnership. That would be great.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Rebecca Harvey, the Climate Mitigation Program Manager for the county, for those of you I don't know. And sorry I was late. I was on a different meeting, but I guess I got here in time. I was pulling up my notes here. Yeah, so as Dana said, Dana and I have worked together on the forest conversion ordinance, and I am going to be working closely with her throughout this process of developing the grant application and the element itself. And so just to provide a little context, I'm leading the county's participation in the regional Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan. Some of you have been very involved in that. And we've been working together with the cities since 2018 to develop the shared climate mitigation plan with our shared community-wide greenhouse gas emission reduction goals. Thurston Regional Planning Council also developed a climate adaptation plan prior to that, My title is climate mitigation, so I work more on the greenhouse gas reduction side. But clearly there's overlap, and I do have a background in working on resilience and adaptation as well. And so the climate element is, of course, both greenhouse gas reduction and resilience. So I'm positioned to contribute to both of those. The collaborative has chosen as its priority regional initiatives for the coming year to focus really on residential electrification and energy efficiency, as well as forest protection advocacy. So just wanted to kind of say that because we're right now recruiting a community advisory work group. Some of you may have seen that, some of you may have already applied for that. It's called the CAW, and the website is thurstoncaw.org or thurstoncaw.org if you want to look at that and apply. But again, this is the regional focus for the 3 cities and the county together with those focus areas that I just mentioned. And that this group is going to be meeting monthly to support the implementation of the plan. And so we may, and I'm meeting with my colleagues in the cities in the coming couple of weeks to talk about everyone's approach to this comprehensive plan, because of course we're all embarking on it. We all have access to the grant application for the Commerce Formula grants. So we're going to see, you know, if that community work group might engage to some level on the comprehensive plan, or if we're going to keep that as jurisdiction by jurisdiction does their own engagement and just kind of see where, you know, what the best use of the collaborative structure is related to this. But I'll stop there. But if anyone has any questions for me, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Rebecca. We thought it would be appropriate, especially since we're not to that point yet with the comp plan update of knowing what any of those draft climate policies are going to look like, that, you know, really the plan that we're working from is the Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan. And that's sort of the starting point along with state's guidance. So I appreciate Rebecca giving us an update on where that plan is going in the near future, and just ensuring that the comp plan update, at least for the county, builds on that work. And, you know, it has been really good collaborative regional work. Similarly with the housing, we are taking a regional approach. There has been regional work done on housing. We have the Regional Housing Council. We've got all the housing action plans that the cities have adopted that they're strategically implementing. And then of course we have all the new state laws related to housing. One of which is the regional housing allocation, which I know you referenced in the letter. I did want to let you know kind of where we're at in that process is that we are working with TRPC and all the cities in Thurston County to take a look at that and figuring out the appropriate methodology that gets applied there. We've only had one meeting though, so I don't have a lot of info to share other than there are 4 more meetings just to talk about housing allocation, that it is very complex. And that we do, you know, intend to be sharing with the public, you know, what those methodologies might look like. And then of course, you know, the comp plan update where that comes in is really taking those numbers and figuring out what policies can you adopt as a community to accommodate those housing allocations by jurisdiction and whatnot. In terms of, you know, the public review and participation, it's very similar to what it would be for climate. I think, you know, holding like a summit for housing would make sense in the same way that holding a summit or some kind of stakeholder work group for climate would make sense. So definitely more to come, but we just don't have a lot to share at this time. Phyllis and then Aiden.
Yeah, I was just wondering if those housing meetings, are they going to be open to the public, or are they hybrids or not?
At this point, it's just really like a technical, they're just like trying to work through the technical pieces of it. It's not, they're not necessarily forums for feedback yet. A lot of it is just like understanding, you know, what the Office of Fiscal Management from the state is, you know, projecting.
Okay, thank you.
Aiden?
Yeah, well, hello, one. And then sort of a two question. Is this how do I ask this? I want to ask about zoning and in this housing element of the comp plan. Zoning is not a part of that, correct?
So a future land use map, which sort of
Yeah.
that vision, it would be part of the comp plan update, and there are definitely, there are considerations for rezoning as part of the comp plan update.
But not specific to the housing element.
I don't know what that would look like at this point. I mean, I think that
Okay.
that's tools in the toolbox for sure. The state has even said like landlords can be considered, which have not been on the table in the past. But I would just say that that's one tool in the toolbox, and there's going to be a lot of tools in the toolbox to try to accommodate the housing needs we have in our community.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the second one is just curious what sort of the county has been thinking or looking towards regarding to, I think the legislation was House Bill 1220, sort of mandating, I think what was it, planning for all types of housing and planning for, what is it, like kind of looking back on maybe racially restrictive housing policies. Are you familiar? Am I making sense?
Mm-hmm. Sorry, is there a question?
But my question is sort of with that kind of legislation in mind, with the housing element. I mean, is that just kind of folded within your process, or is there sort of a particular method that you guys are looking on achieving compliance with that legislation, or something along those lines? Just kind of what are you guys thinking about with that?
I've got lots of thoughts. No, I think, to be honest with you, but we're still in sort of like, let's get our arms around what the new legislation is. The state is also like, they're trying to put together guidance, like the Department of Commerce is trying to put together guidance and having webinars. And so we've just been, like most other jurisdictions, participating in those, trying to just sort of catch up. And then I think there's just going to be a lot of creative thinking as we look forward. Your letter mentioned silos, and one of the biggest silos, as was pointed out, is you've got planning, but there's this funding component that is often left out of comp plans, and this implementation component. And just the fact that our board opted to add on this strategic update to include an implementation plan is really big, and I think presents a lot of opportunities to sort of break down those silos. Like, we're not going to be able to achieve the housing objectives without consideration of what that funding piece looks like. And comp plan it's a policy document. It's not the creation of funding mechanisms or anything like that. But to the extent that you can identify that as an important piece. And that's something the Regional Housing Council has been working on. And so we're kicking off conversations with them and trying to figure out how we can also build off of the work they're already doing.
Ashley, Aiden, we have to stop your questions. Ashley, we need to move on quickly because we're running out of time because we have lots of people who want to ask questions. So can you finish?
Oh, it's done.
Give us, maybe just start giving us some feedback on the document that we wrote.
Oh, I was hoping that I was trying to do that.
Yes, you have been doing that.
I mean, I really appreciated all the thought that went into that initial document. And I think it's perfect timing to sort of bring up a lot of those concerns and have them woven in as we start, laying out what this comp plan update looks like. One of the things I forgot to mention as well is, when we've done comp plan updates in the past, individual staff members have just been assigned, like, here, you do this chapter, and here you do this chapter. We're taking a completely different approach this time, which is we're going to have a comp plan update team, and they're going to meet monthly, and it's going to be cross-departmental. reaching out to other jurisdictions, pulling in stakeholders, you know, and so I think just by virtue of the fact that we're approaching it differently, hopefully the outcome will reflect that, that, you know, that there is more cross-referencing between these different chapters. Yeah, in terms of like specific responses, I don't think we're there yet, other than we're in listening. And, you know, that'll be the starting place when we do get a consultant on board and we do start digging in. You know, the listening sessions we've been doing, like that's the kicking off point for us as staff.
Okay, so we've got 5 minutes left of our time, and so I would like to see who's out there who raise your hand if you have a question or a comment that you want to make to the staff. We've got to have very brief comments. Go ahead, Tom.
Thank you, Loretta. So I've prepared some comments, and some of these reinforce what's in the document. First of all, I would like to say that I hope that the comp plan element on climate and all the other comp plan elements that need to incorporate matters related to climate incorporate measures for climate mitigation and resiliency, you know, lead to those measures being incorporated into codes and ordinances. Secondly, if we don't address our mitigation efforts at the necessary scale and with the required urgency, all of our public systems will be completely overwhelmed within a few years. And so it's critical that yes, we need to do resiliency, but it's absolutely critical that we address the mitigation issue. Third, we need to put people, especially the most vulnerable and defenseless among us, including future generations, we need to put people over profits. And so that needs to be a guiding principle, I believe, of our comp plan update. Next, the crisis we face here in Thurston County, guns, homelessness, housing, health inequities, and obviously the climate breakdown and others are, as you've, I think, recognizing, are completely interconnected and must be addressed together. Fundamental changes will be needed. This will require that we're no longer doing business as usual. Everything is connected. And so I hope that the approach to the comp plan, as you indicated, actually reflects that. And finally, I'd like to suggest incorporating and centering the needs and perspectives of BIPOC, low-income, and frontline communities in the process so that their needs are front and center and recognized and dealt with. Thank you. That's what I have.
Who's next? Elizabeth? Elizabeth, unmute
Yes.
yourself.
Hi, I'm unmuting right now. Thanks. Yes, I just wanted, this is more of a comment rather than a question, but I just want to emphasize that while the comprehensive plan is a great starting point and is a framework and has, where the rubber really meets the road is in the development regulations that are adopted following the comprehensive plan. And we're still in the process, as many of you know, in terms of some of the land use classifications that are being developed for ag lands and industrial lands. We're still in the process of doing that right now. And we need participation involved at that level because it's critical. Once the things get into regulation, they're harder to change. And we saw that happen with mineral lands, where nearly half the county is designated as classified as mineral lands right now, or open to mining. And so I personally feel that that's probably in violation of the 2018 comp plan update that was made. And I at this point, I don't think there's anything we can do about it except try and get an amendment. But what I'm saying to all of you is that you need to participate in the process for these development regulations that are happening right now. Thanks.
Okay, Lynn, thank you, Elizabeth.
I think I'm kind of seconding something that Tom said about timing. One of the struggles I have with the comp plan process, and Loretta is well aware that I've barely been able to bring myself to participate in it, is I see that a lot of business as usual thinking goes on, like planning processes for cities have gone on for decades and centuries, and they always proceed as if we have eternity, and we do not have eternity anymore. And so my hope is that in figuring out the timing for some of these parts, that we can really name out loud that if X or Y doesn't happen by this or that date, we're screwed. Sorry for my French. But you know, like I just think we have to get really real about timing. So that's all I have to say.
Okay, Phyllis, we are out of our scheduled time. How much do you want to allow? A little more, about
Let's
5
have
minutes more?
Yes, this is, I think, an important conversation to have. And in my comment that I mentioned earlier, I think a thread, a lens in the comp planning process should be water availability and water quality. That transcends, you know, transportation, housing, land use, ag, everything. And I guess saying that these things will address it, I guess I'd like to be highlighted more in the planning process, because our water availability is limited. We've got big population growth, and our water quality is being jeopardized by our development, our ag, our transportation, housing needs, etc., stormwater management. So I guess I'd like to highlight water use availability and quality more. I'd like to see that being addressed more. Thanks.
Okay, Aiden, you've spoken before, so just one comment from you. Skip to somebody else soon.
Sure. Yeah. I just, well, in the general statement, just wanted to say that, you know, Habitat for Humanity definitely appreciates the county taking this effort and reaching out. I think you'll find that this group in particular is very engaged and very willing to work with you. And I hope you guys come back. And, you know, to what everyone's saying, I think there's some unique opportunities to kind of, you know, come up with some new tools in the future to implement the comp plan. And one of those, I'll just state, you know, kind of when I was asking about House Bill 1220 and planning for all housing types, I think that, you know, there's a lot of interest in the state legislature in providing financing and different tools to build more housing. So I guess I encourage looking at that and looking at sort of the unique also interest that the legislature is taking in within homeownership with their covenant homeownership program, and within to, I think, maybe even use that as a tool to combat racial equity and, you know, promote housing of all types. So anyways, I'll shut up.
Thank you.
Okay. Esther, and let's make this the last comment for, even though we have a lot more, and
Okay. All right,
I'll send out the email addresses of our guests so that everyone can continue to communicate with them. And you, I'm sure you're getting ideas of things precisely that you want to communicate right now. And so I'll send it out so that you can all do that. I'll send it out after the meeting. Esther.
I just wanted to add on to what Phyllis said, that the county and the cities is responsible for the strategic groundwater reservation that's established under WAC 173591, and that the county could perhaps partner with ecology to get grants to make sure that that groundwater that we all depend on for drinking is protected, because as of the moment, I know that the county, no one is really paying attention to that WAC that established that and charges ecology and the jurisdictions to protect that water.
Okay, thank you to everybody for good comments and questions and being engaged. It really pleases me that everybody is engaged in this entire topic. And so we'll turn it back to you, Phyllis, for the